Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Gray Maybe, the Gray Maybe podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're a repeat listener, I really, really appreciate you coming back and listening. If you're brand new, welcome. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you consider listening to some more episodes coming up. Let's get into it. So, my guest today is a good friend of mine. We originally met in the bowels of bars. Oh, that's a great intro. In the bowels of bars. We're both performers. We met in dressing rooms and on stages, and we spent a lot of time on stage, off stage, in Japan, in the U.S. We have a lot of really good stories, fun times, and at one point, she was a roommate of mine. We spent even more time together. So definitely in our performing days, we spent a lot of time together. Now, this individual is also, I would label her a designer, an entrepreneur. She's also in a new line of work, which maybe she wants to tease or not. You might have to hear it privately to hear about that. She's a witchy wonder. She's a goddess. She's all the things. And she is obviously a friend of mine. Her name is Amber Porter. Welcome to Gray Maybe, Amber.
Hi.
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 What's the new thing you're doing? Do you want to say it or no?
Yeah. It's been so fun. So I just got certified to practice QHHT therapy, which is quantum
QHHT?
T.
Okay.
Yep. Quantum healing hypnosis therapy in the all things pioneered by Dolores Cannon. So there's like a lot of research and stuff behind it since the 60s. It's a lot of past life regression, higher self, you know, a lot of people go into like healing this lifetime traumas and like traumatic memories and energy healing, all of the above. It's been so cool.
That's awesome. I'm glad
Yeah.
you're willing to talk about that because I think it's always great to put out things that people are doing, especially all different types of healing or seeking that people might be interested in. So we'll definitely put that in the show notes, and people will have ways to contact you about inquiring about that or looking it up as well.
Yeah.
So look in the show notes for that. You We talk all the time, like here and there on the
Yeah.
interwebs and things. We keep in touch here and there. And I had posed a question on the gram about if anybody was willing to speak about abuse that they had experienced. And you hit me up. And of course, like we're very close. I find us to be very close and I feel very comfortable with you. So I was like, oh, amazing. Because you have mentioned many things over time and space that qualify. And different levels of all of that stuff. And so it's not naturally, oh, I think of someone or I think of you, but I was just so happy that you hit me up in response that you were willing to talk about it because I never know who's willing to talk about it. Well, and also who's like actually thinking and like identifying that that's some of the stuff that they've experienced, right? So first the recognition and then
Totally.
second to be like, yeah, I'm ready to talk about it. So would you feel comfortable just telling us a little bit about your story or your experience with different types of abuse or whatever you feel like sharing?
Totally. I think my like history with abuse and experience with abuse is like multi-layered across, I would say, the majority of my lifetime.
You said you're like many lifetimes if I want to
And
start.
if we're being real, if you
It
want to
all
get into the
started.
quantum of it, it's
I was,
probably many lifetimes, and I'm here to full circle the
yeah,
lesson,
I
right?
was burned at the stake first and then
And then,
sorry to interrupt. I had to, but yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think that's
totally.
notable right off the bat is that it doesn't necessarily even have to be a singular event of abuse. Like this can be throughout our whole lives. There can be many little things. So sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No. I think it's, I mean, even like I was living with you during the time of coming out of like, you know, some pretty like heavy abuse. And I also think that like people think abuse is like one thing, right? Like it's got to be like really physical or stuff. I mean, it's anything from extreme neglect to, emotional abuse. And, I don't know how much we can say, like sexual abuse.
Yes, you could say it
And
all.
yeah, I mean, I've experienced every gamut of it from the time I was a small child into adulthood,
Yeah.
you know? Um, what else can I say about it? I mean, the like childhood sexual abuse, that stuff's rough because obviously, like, you're a kid and you don't really understand the full scope of it until you
Yeah.
get to be an adult, and that really skews your sense of self and other people and like how you're supposed to relate to other people. And even how adults maybe handle that stuff. I don't know about you, but like I think many kids that have like experienced stuff like that, like when their parents find out about it, or you go to them, or like they even witness a situation that seems questionable, the first like thing that kind of happens is like to deny it, brush it under the rug, pretend it never happened. Like it's very challenging to deal with, and I think it also, from like an adult perspective that doesn't understand what's happening, it it like pulls like their own sense of the world apart, right? So I think it's almost easier for people as adults when they see stuff like that happening, like, no, it didn't happen. That's
Right.
not real. Not
Right.
like, you know,
Stay in
we're
denial
going to
so they don't have
stay in
to
denial,
be
of course.
traumatized by it as well or have
Totally.
to.
Because even like, I mean, you know, could you imagine, like, you're now like a parent, like, you wouldn't want that to be happening to your kids. So for
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
people, I think it was just easier to just be like, yeah, no, or like, what did you do? That's like a
Right.
really common thing, which we can talk more about as we get into this. But
Yeah.
then that
What
carried,
did you do to deserve that? What did you do to entice,
what did you do? What
antagonize?
did you do to entice it? Like, how did this happen? You know? And then, of course, that carried forward into, you know, all of my relationships, every single one. And it was just like a reoccurring theme. Um, because I felt, you know, like just always like kind of like this overwhelming feeling of like abandonment and sense of self that you just never really reclaim
Hmm.
when that's taken from you. And then it's really hard to learn boundaries with people and like all the stuff that like happens, people pleasing and like picking bad partners and playing out, you know, terrible stories with them and X, Y, and Z. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think you had mentioned like it really disrupts how to relate to yourself. And I think that's
Yes.
really poignant because if you don't have a relationship to yourself, it's kind of like how do you interact with everybody else? How do you like advocate for yourself? You can't, right? Like there's this
Yeah.
disconnect and it affects you in all your relationships. Um, I am hearing over and over again the failure of adults to step in when they've been notified and told about abuse. And I don't know if this is generational because a lot of the people that I'm interviewing and talking to are around my same age, which puts us like young Gen X, elder
Right.
millennial type age group. I've had like a younger person, I think, but like um and they had a different experience of that with their parents, but like it seems, I'm hoping it's generational, that was
I
something
think
that we
it's
had to deal with and
generational.
it's starting to
Yeah.
shift. Um, but that is like very common. And I think even if that wasn't common, it would be a common fear of people, anyways. I think it's a natural
Yes.
fear, right, to not want to confide in these things because even if you, well, I don't know. I guess I can't say even if you've been told not to keep secrets with that. I don't actually know that. But I on that side of it. But I think it's what happens to people when they've been abused is I think inherent that people feel like I did something. What did I do? I must be
There's so
responsible.
much shame involved,
Yes.
like
Yes.
in it, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I think that's the like, you know, I mean, how many countless people like in the Me Too movement could have come forward and said
Right.
they didn't because they're going to be victim blamed. I
Yeah.
mean, and even though they come forward, nothing happens. I can tell
Yeah.
you I was raped 3 times as an adult and never told anybody
Yeah.
because who was going to believe me?
Yeah. And on top of that, it's like, okay, so then what? You tell someone, and what's supposed to happen? And let's say you tell the people that culture would tell you you're supposed to tell, like the police, and fill out a report and do the whole thing. So now you have to deal with a court case and be re-traumatized and do that whole thing. Like, I don't even like going to the doctor. Like, it's hard for
Yeah.
me to make a dentist appointment. Jury duty, for fucking get about it. Like,
Oh, yeah.
like
No, like,
I know,
I mean,
like
no.
you're gonna like. I know those are adult things. I do them, whatever. But like, yeah, I don't want to be on the record saying I don't do jury duty. But I call, I do my thing. They say I don't need you. That's what I do. Anyways, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like that's one of the most undesirable positions to be put in, and to be put in not by your own choice. It's just I don't know what the alternative is other than like, hey, abusers, can you just stop abusing? Like, go to therapy, figure it out. But like, really,
Yeah,
like, you're requiring a victim to do so much stuff. Like, and people don't even want to do that much stuff without being victims of traumatic,
totally.
horrible things. So it's not surprising, like, you endure these situations. Like, who are you going to tell? What's the energy that's gonna generate, and what for, and what's the outcome really gonna be? Because we all know that, like, most of these people don't see any kind of retribution or recourse
Yeah.
for their actions, right? It's always he said, she said. And even now, after Me Too, after Time's Up, after all these things, there are still people who very much are like, well, people lie. And it's like, are we still saying that?
Like, are we still doing that? I mean,
Are we still doing that?
I must have had this conversation the other day, like with somebody that's very smart and like you would never, and they were like, well, that girl seemed crazy. And I was like,
Are we still doing that?
really? Like, real, like, and it was in reference. And
Mm.
I just so happened during this period of time to be running in a similar circle and watch this whole shit show go down. And I can attest from like in person experience the nightmare that that man is.
Yeah.
I had a girlfriend date him like immediately after, like the stuff that was going on was like legit. So when someone's like, I don't know, that girl seems really crazy and unhinged. And I'm
And it's
like,
like, oh, so just for the record, crazy and unhinged people deserve to be raped? Or what's the sentiment, that they are crazy and they're making it up? Because a
yeah,
lot of crazy people aren't saying that. And also,
no.
there's a lot of famous people or people in high positions that don't have allegations against them. So I'm just wondering if we could start believing maybe the ones that do.
Do. And I mean, it's so hard for people that have never experienced that type of like abuse to understand that, like, for one, that's probably not their first situation. And for
Absolutely not.
two, to be like put in these really fucking gnarly dynamics where it's like they have to defend themselves. Like, you're groomed to being in that crazy situation anyway. And then by the time you're like screaming from the walls, like, no one's believing me, this crazy thing's going on, like, it's like crazy making.
Hmm.
Like, they put you to your limit. Like, yeah, it's so nuts. And I've experienced that firsthand, right? The like
Right.
crazy making.
Right.
And then
And the
it's an,
gaslighting about it. You're not crazy. I
yeah.
made you crazy, but you're not crazy.
Yeah, I mean it's another abusive tactic, right? And I get like so tired of hearing people call victims crazy people. And usually it's like women, right? I
Hmm.
like it's usually like, well, that chick's crazy or that's crazy. And like again, it's the what did you do to deserve it?
Hmm.
I'm like, hey, how about we stop doing that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Not that hard.
I'm with you on it. I like
You
that you
know?
said, um, talked about reclaiming the self, which I think is a powerful statement. Like, because you talked about going through abuse early in life kind of like severs that connection to the self. And then as you heal, the reclaiming of the self, I think, is a strong narrative for people who are seeking that kind of healing. like reclaiming the self, like getting your power back, right? Like really coming back home to yourself. And I think that's something that people who have suffered a lot of abuse may not even know who that is. It may take time to not only reclaim but refine and rebirth and like all of those things. I just love that you said that. I love the way that that was said.
Yeah, and
You
I think
mentioned,
that takes, a radical act of strength and faith and putting in time. Like it's not necessarily, it's not like linear, right? Like we say healing's not linear. It's really not.
mm-hmm,
Um, it's just like it comes with time and perspective and whatever your preferred healing modality might be to like cope and manage because
mm-hmm,
it forever changes you regardless.
mm-hmm,
You can step into your power and reclaim some of that and, not live life like a victim, but
mm-hmm.
it does kind of always change how you relate to the world.
Yeah, I agree to that. And
Yeah.
the comment on time is definitely relevant, not only in, I just remember when I had my knee surgery, I would go to the physical therapist and they had like this chart. So like you would do your physical therapy, they would put all the stuff like the notes into the computer and they would chart your trajectory of your healing essentially, right? That's what it is. It's like a
Yeah.
graph to show, your healing.
How you getting
And
better?
yeah, and it was like up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Like it was overall an upward trajectory, but in that trajectory was like stock market shit, man. It was like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down.
Yeah.
Because every time I got stronger, I got less flexible, and every time I got more flexible, I got less strong. And as you're going through it, time to time, it can feel like you're getting worse, and then you get a little bit better, and then you feel like you got worse, and then you get a little bit better. And I thought that was so interesting at the time. I hated it. I was like very miserable, but like, I've had enough time away from it now to look back and be like, oh yeah, totally. Healing is definitely not linear. It's not just like a constant upward, you know, climb.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hardest things about healing is there will be some times where you're like, oh, I feel really great. I can see my progress. And then there's times that you're like, I feel like I relapsed. Like that, like I had a trigger or someone from my past who was very abusive reached out and talked to me and it triggered a bunch of trauma and PTSD, or I heard a noise on, the airplane that like then or whatever it is, little things that
Totally.
sometimes you're not even aware of, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's why I was so on edge, or that's why I've been so nauseous, or whatever. So thank you for saying that about time. I think it's a really important reminder to people, whatever your recovery journey is, whatever you're recovering from, it's not linear, and time does help. Like time. Sometimes it just takes time for some of this stuff to get better. You also mentioned like not having a lack of boundaries. I think that is, or having not having a lot of boundaries, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a through line to a lot of people who have experienced abuse is either they didn't have a ton of boundaries because either their family dynamic, the way they were brought up, didn't really cultivate that, or they were early abused, which like shreds all boundaries, right? Um, and then as you get older and older, you don't really figure it out, or you're kind of always dealing with a lack of boundaries, and then they get crossed more and more and more and more, and you have less and less and less. Um, and I see that as kind of a through line for a lot of people that are kind of going through and have experienced a lot of this stuff. Um,
Yeah. I mean, and it's really, I still struggle with that, right? Like, still. And putting myself first. I will do the exact opposite. Everyone else first, everyone else's needs. And a lot of that, understanding where I'm coming from is a reactive safety protective mechanism. Because if I can control the exterior situation of everything that's going on around me, then like I can be safe and be okay.
mm-hmm.
Right. And it still is very much a struggle to be like, okay, it's okay if I like do this thing today and just focus on me or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. It still is very much a struggle.
Yeah. And as you are like as a kid, might be a different answer for different things that you've mentioned,
Totally.
but like when these things happen, did you know that what you were experiencing was abuse when it happened, or did it take a long time? Like, this can be many different answers, because I'm sure, like, as a kid, maybe you don't know, and then as an adult you do, but then you're just,
Totally. Like I think like my first memory of something weird happening is being caught in the basement with the neighborhood boys, like pinning me against the wall and ripping my clothes off, and my dad coming downstairs and being like,
what the fuck?
"What the fuck? Go home, put your clothes on." And it was very much like
Like, you
I
did
was in
something, like,
trouble.
yeah, what are you doing
I was
down
in
here?
trouble. And again, man of a different generation. Like my
Right.
father's 90
Yeah. How
and
old were you?
small. Like small. Like I don't even know if I'd started kindergarten yet.
Holy shit. I mean, it doesn't
I mean,
matter what age you
it's
are. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
give like a perspective of like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mind
And I like
frame.
same thing, like stuff like being chased. And I remember being in preschool and being chased by boys that wanted to kiss me and having
Mhm.
like full panic, like screaming terror meltdowns. And now I can like connect the dots of the two as to why that was like
So
such a
terrifying.
traumatizing. And my teachers used to laugh and be like, "Well, they have a crush on you. It's so funny." And I was just like so traumatized by like a boy trying to kiss me on the cheek on the playground. Like, obviously as an adult, you're like, oh, because of all this other stuff that happened.
And can we also just take a pause from you continuing that question or answering that question to say how annoyed I am by the response of they hit you because they like you, or they
Yes.
kick you because they like to young
But
girls, as a
no,
way of like how you're supposed to deal with the violence of young men or boys is
totally.
so what, to ignore them or like tolerate it because that's how they deal with their feelings. Like, I don't
You're
know
like,
if
no, because
that's
they grow up to be adults with big feelings that don't, and they can't cope with them. And then we are still on the receiving end of that. Still.
they just like me so much. They just like
Yeah.
me so much. They got to
Well, then
beat
it's
my ass.
ingrained in your head. And
Yeah.
then, like, that translates into, like, I don't know, 1,000 relationships where you're
Yeah.
just like, it's okay. He just did that because he cares, or
Right.
he's just having a bad day. He can't process this emotion. And because, we've been raised to, like, handle the other sex's emotions,
Hmm.
they're not raised to handle ours. Anytime I've
No.
cried in front of a boyfriend, they're like, what is going on? You're crazy. You need to calm down. Like, you know what I mean? And you're like, but I'm tired. I'm having a feeling. And like, I'm having this feel. Like, can we talk? And they're like, oh no.
Hmm.
But like, we're expected to deal
To
with the
carry
latter.
yeah, a lot of emotional labor. A lot.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, so before I interrupted about they just
No,
kick you and
no.
chase you because they like you. Um, so as a young person, like, you probably didn't recognize that that was abuse. Was there other stuff
No.
that happened as you grew up that you're like, that's that, moving on? Or has it always been, for me, it's always taken time. Like, I can never see it in its moment at all. Like,
Never.
and sometimes it takes me a really long time. Like, I'm still now, things will pop up in my head and I'll be like, that was definitely that, or that was that. But like, it's
Totally.
take a long time.
Yeah, no, it's taken like a lot of time. Also because I've been like a very driven and focused person in other ways.
Hmm.
And I just kind of was like, the thought, like, from my earliest time, like, I knew I would leave. I would leave, like, where I grew up living. I would leave, like, my parents behind, like, for all their faults, whatever. Like, they did the best they can. But I was like, I don't want any part of, like, this dynamic because, on top of, like, the trauma experienced as a child, there was also, like, the not healthy family relation dynamic. And I just was like, can't wait to get out. I'm just not even going to worry about it. I'm going to like look this way and just keep trucking forward.
Hmm.
And it probably wasn't until my 30s where I was like, oh,
Yeah.
like
So it's
until
like
it
almost,
literally hit me in the face and I'm like calling you and you're like, dude. And I'm like, I know, I got to get out of here. And then like I sat and started to be like, oh, this has happened like a lot in my life
hmm,
in various ways.
hmm, Yeah. I mean, you're like in survival mode, right? You're just trying to survive. You
all the
get out,
time,
move
all the
on,
time.
like keep busy. I know you have always been such a hustler to like take care of yourself, you know? And I
Yeah.
think that's like obviously like it's a great thing, but it's also like a learned survival, right? Like I
Right.
have to make sure that I can cover myself because other people are disappointing and
Yeah. And they
are not
won't.
safe and they're not safe
Mhm.
for me, you know? So like I've always known you to be such a go-getter, work so freaking hard, and also take care of people so hard, which is like all these like amazing traits until abusers and narcissists get a hold of that and they're like, this is amazing.
Yeah, they're like, this is great. What more can I just like suck out of you?
Hmm.
Totally. And I've
Yeah.
definitely done a few of those in a row.
Yeah. Well, you're a very attractive candidate for them for that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're an attractive candidate, period. And then on top of that, you have that
No,
going
I
for you
know,
as
but
well.
even when you're like, I'm doing the work and I've figured it out and I recognize the red flags, it's like they change the red flags all of a sudden. And then you're like in it and you're like, wait, how did I just,
How did I end up back here?
how did I, like, I thought I learned the lesson already. Why am I doing it again? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's really hard. It's hard. If anybody's ever been in these situations, you know that it's really difficult. It's difficult to change and then it's difficult to get out of the patterns. Like it's just hard. Um has there been anything that like really surprised you about either processing like different abuses or in your recovery? Like was there anything that was like a huge light bulb moment or just like a surprise in how that went along or
I mean, I think that like exiting any type of abusive situation or like aha or whatever, it was always like at first I was like really hard on myself. Like real and I think people don't understand that. They there's a lot with the victim shaming, it's a lot of like, well, how stupid could you be to get into that? Or like, why would you stay? Or like, why didn't you leave the first time it happened? What I all the stuff and the stories. I mean, like we're so hard on ourselves for so many. I mean, like it's maybe I could like liken it to this. Like when people really hate cilantro
mm-hmm.
and they think it tastes like soap.
Yes.
Like there's just some people that
Some
are like
people.
cilantro
Yeah.
tastes like soap, can't do it.
Yeah.
I it's like that. It's like it's so ingrained, but it's like the opposite where you're like, I love cilantro, I love salsa, like whatever. Like it's you're having to like change like your whole palate and it doesn't like click
You
in your
keep
brain.
you keep eating cilantro and you can't taste the soap and everybody else is
Yeah,
like, this is
it
soap,
tastes
you're
like
eating
soap.
soap, what are you doing? And you're like,
Yeah,
I can't taste it, I can't taste
yeah,
it. And they're like, it's soap, don't eat it. And you're like, but all my recipes have cilantro in it.
yeah. You're like, I
How
don't
am I
get it. Like
supposed to cook?
you're like, I don't see it. I don't get it. And so it's like, then you have to like go off of other people, but like, you're like, well, you don't want to do that because you can't live your life for other people. So you're trying to like redevelop this like intuition that you've abandoned
Yeah.
and you can't trust really. So it's so interesting. I mean, like, just like so hard on myself, like,
I like
which
the
is totally the
cilantro
opposite.
metaphor. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah, that's like literally what it is. Because
metaphor.
you're like,
Yeah.
it, it tastes like it tastes like soap, and you're like, I don't know, it tastes like great. I love salsa. Let's put some more salsa on that.
But it's like that honing, that like your natural honing isn't work. It's like not quite working quite right or something. And
Yeah,
because of what's happened. And like you talked about it like intuition. And I have such a hard time deciphering the difference between my intuition and my anxiety.
yeah,
And that's sucks because I have really good intuition. Like really, really good intuition. Coincidentally, I'm also highly anxious. So like,
yeah. Because you can feel everything, and but like what that goes hand in hand. Because same,
mhm.
I have great intuition if you want to ask me about somebody else or yourself or any other situation. But when it comes to me, I will start second guessing and
Mhm.
making excuses and being like, that's not it, because it is. It's your fractured sense of self. And that's what
Mhm.
happens when you're a small child. There are a million behavior studies. Like, it's so hard to like reclaim that fully. I just like have accepted that it's going to be a lifetime, you
Endeavor.
know,
Yeah.
endeavor. I mean, at some point you have to choose just to live your life and like,
Mhm.
okay, but like you're never just going to put a pin in it and call it a day.
Yeah. But I mean, I think anybody who struggles with anything, which everybody struggles with something, and if you don't, you're lying to yourself. You better figure it out. But like I think it's always like a lifetime thing. Like if you suffer from addiction, I do think you suffer your whole life. I think it's like if you're able to maintain sobriety, great. But like that doesn't mean that like you could pick up whatever you was that you were using and be like, I'm cool now. I'm good. I like, you know, I won sobriety and now I'm fine. I can do it again, and I think that's with anything, and the healing from stuff like this, unfortunately, it may not have been a uh, consented choice like picking up a drug or doing something like that could be, but you have to deal with the consequences nonetheless, and it could be a lifetime of like figuring it out and trying to work on it so that you can deal with things better and better or enjoy life more and more.
Yeah.
um Is there anything like that you can think of specifically that has helped this, like the process of you moving through things, or even like something that didn't help, like something that absolutely didn't help? Obviously, I think people asking you why did you get into this or why didn't you do this doesn't seem like it's very helpful.
Yeah, it's like not helpful at all. I mean, I spent time going to different types of meetings. I've spent time in different therapies. Um, I don't know, like talk there. Obviously, like you can't hold it in and not speak about it. Like your secrets will make you sick. There
Yeah.
is scientific evidence for that. Not
Mm-hmm.
like it will make you sick. So you've got to speak about it, even if it's just to a close friend or somebody, just to like get it out there. I think my own spiritual belief system has helped me kind of like be able to see the bigger picture and navigate that a little
Mm-hmm.
bit easier. I'm a believer that, we enter into this lifetime, we pick our soul contracts, and I know nobody wants to hear this, and it's really hard to hear this, but we co create this like reality with other people. So, like, did I pick being abused as a child? Did I pick like I know it sounds disgusting. You're like, why would you pick that? I don't know. That was like the lesson I needed to learn in this lifetime was I guess to transmute all of these things and like see it from a different perspective to help other people through it. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that kind of gives me some solace and like some relief to it because every time now when something comes up, I'm like, okay, well, what's the lesson in this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I can detach from it enough, from like all my like triggering and like, my trauma and like having my meltdown about it, if I can just like take a minute and be like, what's the lesson? What's the purpose? What's this trying to teach me? It, there's something there.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a boundary. It's probably like, lack of self love or, choosing the wrong people or you're not aligned in like whatever direction you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And would you say the QHHT stuff that you do you think that's also has been a part of like your own
Oh,
personal
for
healing
sure.
journey? Yeah.
For sure, for sure. I read a Dolores book when I was like 19. But what are
Mm-hmm.
you going to do with that when you're 19, right? Like you
Right.
haven't lived enough. I had
You
experienced a
had
lot of shit,
so
but I
much
had,
more abuse to
yeah, like,
experience.
we
You
weren't
had
even
your
halfway down the road.
whole life of abuse yet waiting for you.
I need 20 more years of abuse to understand like what any of those books I read meant, right? And then
Yeah.
yeah. So it's been like kind of interesting. It was always kind of in there, but like wasn't ready for it,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like any addiction or addict or thing that comes up in life, like advice, whatever, you will hear it when you're ready for it. And
Right.
like, I was like, no, there, like, let me be a victim some more.
Hmm.
And then let me like jump into like another red flag situation and, create some more like traumatic situations for myself. And you know what I mean? Because as an adult, you have to accept some kind of responsibility
Hmm.
once you are aware,
Hmm.
right? Like, and that also, nobody wants to hear that in the moment. Pro
Hmm.
tip, like, if somebody's in the thick of it, do not give them this speech. They don't want to hear it,
No.
they can't recognize it. Like, you just need to, like, hold space for them, reassure them they need love and kindness to, like, feel full again. And when they're aware and healed to some extent outside of it and detached, then you can start having the like, why did I choose to do that to myself again
Hmm.
conversation, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's like anybody who's been through something like super traumatic, it's not the time to be like, if someone has been in a traumatic fire, it's not the time to be like, well, like, was your fireplace going that night? Like, how did this start? It's like, now's not the time. Like,
no, you're
it's,
like a burn victim that needs like medical care.
you need a
And
salve.
then, yeah, when you're like scabbed over and ready, then you can go talk to the plastic surgeon about like skin grafts. Like, but not in the moment when you're like, I'm like
Yeah.
internally, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not the right time. And it may never be the right time, but it's certainly not the right time like then. Um,
Yeah.
you said one of my favorite quotes, which is your secrets keep you sick, or you're only as sick as your secrets, like that idea. And I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. Um, secrets feel like it's the nature of secrets to keep them inside, obviously, because that's what a secret is. But there's something about it. There's something about keeping information that is so kind of toxic to ourselves, yet the elixir for it is to set it free, and we don't want to do it. And I do think there's a big price to pay for that health eventually down the line.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read any of the material by Gabor Mate.
No.
He is all about like autoimmune and things like that,
Yeah.
based on, and he's major credentials in the scientific and like world of physicians and stuff. So
Yeah.
if you happen to be very much on the data and science side of things, he checks those boxes. And also, if you happen to be more on the metaphysical plane of things, he checks those boxes as well. So I'll put some links
Yeah, I do. I mean, like the spiritual woo woo and the scientific communities are definitely like catching up to each other right now,
mhm,
which I love. I love the blending of the two. Women have the highest rate for autoimmune diseases.
mhm.
We're
Why is that?
also like, the majority carrier of abusive emotions and just having to like suck it in and just keep it going and like just survive and like, I mean,
Mhm,
my mother's a perfect example, a perfect textbook example, experienced her own abuse, which, from a child and then continued into adulthood through multiple relationships. She's got cancer several times over, autoimmune diseases. I mean,
right,
it's textbook that.
right, yeah. Yeah, I really think that if you keep that stuff inside, you're going to pay for it in a way with your health. And that's not a threat. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I'm just trying to encourage people to, health is not just what you eat. It's not just your exercise. It's not just your mantras. Your health is, your body reacts to your emotions. Like if you've ever been through, somatic therapy stuff, cognitive behavioral therapy, like any of that kind of stuff, like a lot of it is based on like how does your body feel. So if your body is reacting to your feelings, whether you're aware of it or not, your body does, because that's what, our body, we're like animals, so we react to things. And So there has to be some kind of a correlation, and there's going to be a price to pay if that is ignored or pushed down or repressed and suppressed. Um, yeah, I mean, I love that you said that. I also like to see the two uh, spheres kind of coming together in one, and as a whole body treatment. I think a lot of times in Western medicine or medicine in general, there's a discount to your mental and emotional well-being and spiritual well-being. Although, they always mention it. They're like, well, are you stressed? That's like code for what else is going on, right?
Yeah,
Stress can cause, like, you need to take stress, eat well, that kind of stuff. It's mentioned, but I still don't think the care and attention is on it as much as if you're
totally.
fully holistic. Like, there's a lot of attention on that. So I love to see those things coming together as well.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why you think there's so much stigma and shame surrounding abuse? Like, I don't know why either. Like, I can't figure it out, because it is weird,
Yeah.
because when it happens to me, I feel the same. I feel shame, stigma, whatever. When I hear other people, I'm like, you have nothing to be ashamed of. This is
Right.
that, like, it's so
You
clear
want to rah-rah around them. You're like, fuck this, I
I'm
don't.
constantly like, when I hear other people's stuff, I'm like, oh, you have nothing to feel ashamed of. But I just, for myself, I'm like, oh, this is really, like, I don't want to talk about it, so I don't know what that, I don't have an answer. I was just wondering if do you have any answers for me?
I don't have an answer either as to like, I mean, I guess it could be like a complicated one, right? Like one position of being like in power and control and like the ingrained just kind of culture around it is is what it is on this planet at this time,
Mm,
right? I mean, nobody wants to be like bothered with your drama, right? Like nobody wants to be attached to that energy because that could like personally affect them in some way
mm-hmm.
if you're like speaking out or, you know, ruffling feathers in that kind of way. Or, I mean, I just like the like cognitive dissonance of like just really destroying your worldview that some people just aren't capable of dealing with, right? Like when they witness abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just like to me, it just feels like it's been just like a culture for so long. And I don't know if it's like, the empathy thing where like people have a hard time like feeling for someone that's been in that situation because they haven't been in that situation, which if you haven't, I am so glad for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think you and I have joked before
How nice for you.
about a couple different things where we're like, I am either like, oh wow, you must have never had anything bad happen to you if you can act like that.
You are
Like,
so well adjusted. That is so nice for you. What is that
yeah,
like?
like,
What is that like?
okay, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
otherwise, I'm like, why are you talking about it like that or treating that person in that way that
Yeah.
has experienced that? So, I mean, I guess that's my only thing is like, oh, it's just like a culture of what's been like, bred around it.
Yeah.
And that's to purely discredit the victim, right?
Right.
And benefit
The
one
abuser.
party.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, like, it's the, like, when anything happens, there's ripples to it, right? When somebody passes away, there's ripples of grief through many people and many things based on your proximity to that situation. And I feel like it's the same with abuse. Like, if there's abuse in the family, the ripples through the family, right? Of, okay, what do we do with this information? Do we just, you know quiet the victim so that we don't have to deal with ostracizing the family member, who most likely is probably an elder adult who either demands a lot of respect or people want to give them a lot of respect, or if there's a ripples through a professional situation, and the person in question who's abusing is of great power and stature, which often happens, and then people don't want to be the first one to speak up, or they don't want to be one of the many to speak up, because either way you're going to be punished for that. Whether you're the only one, it's like, well, there's only one person, or if there's many, it's like, oh, they're all looking for money. It's just like there's
Yeah.
a no-win situation. And I'm just like, it's so crazy because the shame and the stigma should be on the person abusing, and it should never be on the person who's been abused or the victim in the situation. Yet we see it time and time and time and time again. Like, our culture, the way we deal with it is that's just not how it works. And I mean, I'm sure the person who's abusing, well, actually, I'm not sure. I would assume they have their own shame, and that's why a lot of them are acting out and abusing. But then again, maybe a lot of these people really don't have much insight to their own psyche, and they are sociopathic or narcissistic or whatever. I don't know, have some kind of condition that makes them, impermeable to empathy or whatnot. I'm not sure, but it's a difficult question. I thought I'd ask you with no answer that I have myself, but that was an excellent answer.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's like, it's all of the above, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm always just like, why, like, for me, because my trauma has been, and my abuse has always been at the receiving hands of men. And while I don't really ever want to be like man hater, like, I'm really like not, and I kind of, uh, really guide against people doing that. But for me, I'm like, we need to start raising boys to, be better,
Mm-hmm.
handle their emotions. I mean, like, men get abused too.
Mm-hmm.
Men
Mm-hmm.
experience sexual abuse, and
Mm-hmm.
same thing. And even like if they've experienced something like that and then they turn into an abuser, well, you don't raise men to have feelings
Mm-hmm.
and like express them or to talk about it, or and then like
Right.
that just like perpetuates like a cycle.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, it's we got to do better as, I don't have kids, but like as moms and like
Mm-hmm.
people in the community and as caregivers, and like when you see something, like it's okay to like offer maybe some like guidance if you're
Mm-hmm.
close with somebody, or
Mm-hmm.
some words of wisdom, or you know
Yeah. I mean, this
'cause
just proves that sexuality is not a choice, because if you could choose,
if
you
I
would.
could literally I'm like, man, if I could date chicks, it would just be like over and over again. I'm just like,
Yeah.
and then it will like get to the point like where I've like many times where I'm like, I'm done. I think like it's fine. I'm just not gonna date anymore. That's the solution.
Yeah.
And then I'll like go like for a while like no dating, and like think everything's better. I'm like so much better. Everything's great. And then I like find myself and I'm like, oh, here's like a triggering situation with somebody else, or
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
just yeah.
I mean, that's always like also like a codependence kind of MO. I'm not saying you are a codependent. I'm saying, like, we
Yeah.
talk about codependency a lot this season, and like one of those things with codependency is like, I'm okay if you're okay, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
also, I know some codependents that will do that. They will go like these stark, like almost kind of like cold turkey sober, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to date, I'm not going to do any of this stuff. And then it's like, not much longer, it's like, oh, I met a new person, and like, because that's their deal. But they're not necessarily in abusive relationships. They may just get super enmeshed, and it might be hard for them to then unenmesh and find themselves again wholly.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely, I think with boys and young men, I'm hoping there's some kind of a quantum shift, because exactly like you said, if a lot of these men have uh, experienced abuse, where does that go? If they are not encouraged to heal from it, like women, at least women are encouraged and expected to heal. We're
Yeah.
actually even just expected to heal. Like,
We're
you guys,
expected to.
yeah, that's just what you do, right? But men, there's no expectation, and there's not even really an honoring of that this stuff happens to them. I mean, I think we're starting to get a little better with it. Like, obviously people understand now that men can be abused, that this does happen to boys and young men. And so there is that conversation happening, which I think opens the door obviously up to much more healing and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, how do we stop that cycle? And it freaks me out because I feel like we just started really recognizing that, honoring that, and putting some focus on it. And now I feel like there's like a concerted effort culturally to like maintain a really weird idea of masculinity that I think is not helpful. Like it's the antithesis of where that would go, is like men being more in touch with their feelings and being more emotionally intelligent does not make them weak, right?
No.
And it doesn't, men, helping women with childcare and housework and equal duties does not make them little bitches or whatever, like, which is also a female slang term, right? Like all the slang terms you want to call them are a slam on women, like pussy, little bitch, like,
Always.
effeminate, soy boy, like limp wrist, like all that shit. It's an attack on that, it's like they're all like women or possibly even gay men, like
Yeah,
slams, right? So it's like,
absolutely.
I hope that we can do better with that. I think it's a really good point you bring up. And I hope that as this next generation of boys, it's just better. It's better than what they had, and it'll be better going forward. Um, let's see. I have kind of one last big question for you. And
Give it
yeah, give it to me. I'm ready.
to
So on the podcast, a lot of times I say that we don't give advice, but sometimes we give suggestion. Um, do you have a suggestion or suggestions for someone who might be suffering from abuse right now?
Ooh, it's a tough one. You have to have somebody you can confide in. You have to tell somebody. Someone has to know something. Um, if only for no other reason than if something happens to you, people know why. And that's a really dark reasoning, but if nobody knows, and I mean, like, I can't even, I hate that like, this is the world we live in, but if nobody knows and, you end up dead or disappear or whatever it is, like, I mean, that's the most tragic of circumstances, right? Then at least there's something to go on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like obviously the worst case scenario, but even for your own health. And tell somebody that understands if it's a phone call, a meeting, something else. Like, don't call someone that's like, you need to leave and exit this situation right now,
Right, right.
because that's not always going to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of people don't understand that one either.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to find some semblance of community for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because when you don't have that, and I've been in this situation many times where I'm isolated, and then I tend to self isolate when things get like really difficult because I don't know how to deal with them, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to just deal with it, and I don't want to like bring my drama and da 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 da, but like there's no like kind of escape from it, from like how you feel, from your perspective, from the relief of the situation, so I think it's really important to have some kind of like outside community or a friend that you can confide in. I mean, it really makes a difference.
And how, like, looking back at some of those moments in your life where you would self isolate, like, what finally were you able to do to kind of pull yourself out in those moments? Do you
I
recall,
think it
like,
had to get like so bad. I think it had to get like so bad to where, as like, to where I feared for my life.
mm,
either it was like from the hand of my abuser or from the situation, because the only way out that I saw was me ending my own life.
Mm. Yeah.
You know, I think that's something else like we don't talk about,
Mm-hmm.
like in abusive situations, where how like beaten down the other person can get. And
Mm-hmm.
because we take it on and we're so hard on ourselves, like the only option seems to be a dramatic exit strategy
Yeah.
to like, you know, make it stop. So I would say that those were like kind of the only times that I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I
It kind of,
know, like on the regular, I'm not like that person, right? I'm
mm-hmm.
not like, I'm just gonna, like, I'm having a bad day. Let me just like end it all. Like, it would have to get like really,
Right.
really dark.
Right.
And that was
Right.
the only time that I was like, okay,
That's your
this
rock
is
bottom.
my, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. There's a, well, first of all, I want to address your suggestion, which I think is absolutely true, and it is dark, but it's necessary. You have to tell someone. You got to find someone that you can confide in, you know. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make when they hear that information is that they feel like they need to fix it or get like you said, get the person out right away. And it's like that may not be first of all, it's not your job. Like what the best thing I think a lot of people can do is when they hear information like that, hear what the person is saying. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. Please, if there's any way I can help, I want to be helpful to you. What can I do to help? Is there anything I can do to help? And sometimes it's just hearing it. And not everybody has the capacity to hear that kind of stuff and not let it fuck them up. But if you can hold space for someone to hear it and just let them process by telling you, validate their experience. That doesn't mean you need to tell them what to do. Just validate, wow, that's really scary. Wow, that's really terrible. You must be really traumatized. This must be really scary. This must be really hard. I'm sorry this is happening to you, right? And then offer them some kind of help. Like, if you need a place to stay, you can always come here, or I can help you find a place, or if you need me to come grab your stuff, like, just the offer the solutions. And then if they never call you again or don't say a thing because they're ashamed or they're not ready or whatever it is, that they had that conversation. So if something happens, you had that interaction. So I really encourage people to make that phone call or make that connection, like Amber said, because abuse is progressive. Okay, it's a progressive situation. No one, is, in an abusive situation that just got better. Unless there's
No.
like some other thing, like, oh, when they drink, they become this person, but otherwise they're not. And then now they're sober and it's fine. Okay, maybe. But like people who are abusing on the daily or whatever that cycle is, like, it is a progressive scenario. Like, usually people who are abusive continue to be abusive and they get more and more abusive, and it accelerates, right? Like
And it
everything,
gets
it gets
and it gets worse when you try to like detach from it
right.
and, you know, it try to leave.
Yeah.
Like it that's when things could potentially get to be their scariest.
Yes, I
So it's,
agree. Yeah,
you know,
we hear that a lot in culture and media, and probably through people we know. You mentioned the suicidal nature of feeling like that was kind of like your rock bottom. It reminded me of this series. It's a series called Made, and it's got Margaret, what's her name? She's Andy Dowell's daughter. She's very popular right now. She was just in The Substance. But there's this series that came out a couple years ago called Maid, MAID. And it's an excellent portrayal of a young woman trying to navigate her way out of poverty. But there is a scene in there where she has a not categorically abusive thing, but like abuse with her baby daddy, on off boyfriend, husband person. And something happens, like there's like a moment of abuse, and the whole series is very based in reality. It all of a sudden goes to her melting physically into the couch, melting, like just melting into the couch. It goes complete like fantasy, like the visuals of it it just goes, and it's, to me, that was symbolic of that type of depression.
It is. I mean, it's so overwhelming. Like, you could not be in a financial position, like who know, like, do you have children? Is it intertwined? Are your lives intertwined? Are your social circles intertwined? Like, you know, very often the abuser turns out to be somebody that everybody loves and you're
Very
annoying.
charismatic, very well
Yeah.
liked and loved. Yes, that is not uncommon.
And you're, the annoying one. And then it's like, okay, so now I'm going to lose like my social circle and all these like repercussions. And it just starts to feel like so much and you're tired and drained. So the like thought of also trying to even pull it together to
Hmm.
be like, so what's my next move is overwhelming.
Yes. Yes. Being in abusive situations is also, as we've mentioned in some of the other episodes, is extremely exhausting. And
Yeah.
to make a big life change, if you're not ready, or even when you are ready, it's really, really difficult. It takes a lot of energy when you're already depleted spiritually, emotionally, physically, all those things. I think that's a very important point. Um, I'm going to put a lot of stuff in the show notes. We'll have your QHHT stuff in the show notes. We'll have Made, the movie, or sorry, series I just mentioned. We'll have Gabor Mate and there, a bunch of stuff. But Amber, thank you so much for,
Yeah, of course.
I got to catch up with you a little bit, but I'm
I
so
know.
thankful. Thank you so much for taking the time and
Of
talking.
course.
I've always found you to be like so matter of fact about your experiences and willing to talk about them in such a shameless way that I really appreciate. So, whatever you're feeling about them, like, it doesn't come off that way. And I think it's really empowering to see someone model that, you know? So, I
Yeah, I mean,
appreciate that.
we don't have to be our traumas,
Mm,
you know? We don't, that doesn't have to be the end of our story. It can just be part of it. And if, anything that I've said is a takeaway and like, let it be that.
hmm.
Like, and if anything, is helpful to anyone because it is a lot. It's a lot to endure.
Yeah. And, you don't have to, you don't have to be identified by your traumas in this lifetime or all the past ones. And if you want to explore them,
Yeah.
call Amber, and
Call me.
she's gonna work through it with you. I mean it. Like, like, there's, I have all different types of people on the pod, and some people, like, I have Jada, who always comes on. She's a psychologist. You can hit her up or be directed towards that. I'm going to send you people. People should hit you up if they want to do that type of work as well. I think it's awesome and very cool. So, but yes, Amber, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.